and that you will faithfully discharge the duties.
For Governor Rick Snyder, the new year started with a time-honored tradition of transferring, or in this case, maintaining power in the state with his inauguration.
I do.
Congratulations.
He then set his sights on what's next.
Yes. If you go back to the lost decade, we did that to ourselves. Because we were so successful, we took our eye off of the ball and how we build it by working together and spent a decade fighting and blaming one another. With relentless positive action, we've turned that around, where now we recognize success is based on us, understanding why we may be different. There is common ground there, and we can do special things. We can do incredible things when we do them together.
This morning on our program, we continue to introduce you to the new members of the legislature the governor will be working with in his second term. Good morning and welcome to the Point. Every 2 years we have a general election that has a great impact on who represents you in Washington and here in Michigan. Over the past several weeks, we've been introducing you to the newly elected members of the State House. There are a lot of new faces in our area, at least 10, but in all but a couple of cases, they represent the same party as the person they're replacing. One notable exception is Dr. John Bizon. He will represent the 62nd District as a Republican, making a switch from Democrat Kate Siegel, who could not run again because of term limits. We talked with him about priorities, keeping in mind our conversation took place before the conclusion of the lame duck session. Well, let's talk about the end game, if you will. We talked to you in the primary cycle. We have seen this election play out. We now know what the results are. How does it feel from your perspective after a lifetime in medicine to have what you may not consider a new career, but at least a new job in the House of Representatives?
This is a whole lot different than medicine. I've greatly enjoyed taking care of people over the years, and this is going to be taking care of people on a lot larger basis. Now I have an entire district to take care of, half of a county, and the people of the state of Michigan. And I think that I'll bring along many of the same attitudes, many of the same talents that we had for medicine, but applied on a much broader basis, and I'm looking forward to trying to be able to do that.
When you and I first talked, medicine was a big part of that conversation because you had been an advocate, you had worked in Lansing, you had gone and tried to get members to listen and say, look, there are some things that you here in Lansing could do to help us out on the ground, help folks. It was my impression that you didn't always feel like you were being listened to, or at least your information wasn't being acted upon. So that was part of your reasoning for running. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. You know, I think that I'd like to contribute yet. And I feel that healthcare is one of two major areas that we need a lot of help right now. You know, I think that medicine is too expensive. You know, it lacks transparency, it lacks competition. And we have to do a whole lot better. We're spending nearly 20% of the GDP nationally on healthcare, as estimated by the GAO, the Government Accounting Office. And I don't think that that's sustainable into the long term. We're draining lots of resources in healthcare where other nations are doing it a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively, and we need to do better than what we are doing.
On a state level, how do you approach that? Now, we know in the last session there was a Medicaid expansion bill, but that's already happened. We know that at the federal level, a lot of mandates have been created through the Affordable Care Act, but that too is already done. What can you do from your perspective at the state level that would start to address some of that problem? When you talk about healthcare being 20% of all of what we have at our disposal, that makes it kind of a stark issue to deal with.
I think that one of the things that we are going to need to do in healthcare is work more efficiently and more effectively. And surprisingly enough, I see the Medicaid program as being a possible savior to healthcare for the nation. I'm under the impression that in another 2, 3, 4 years, the federal government is going to figure out that it can't afford healthcare the way it was planning to in the past, and it's in all probability going to be turning to the states and looking for help, most probably in the form of block grants. And I think that one of the things that we need to do here as a state is to be ready in the eventuality that that's going to happen. You know, if we're going to be accepting block grant money for the state, it may give us the opportunity to experiment, and we'll have 50 different states doing 50 different things. But if we have some idea of what works well and what is efficient, then we may have a leg up on the program and may be able to recommend suggestions and changes that would be beneficial to the people of this state and for the taxpayers of this state.
When you think of your 109 colleagues that you'll be serving with, understanding that many of us view healthcare from a pretty pedestrian point of view. We go visit our doctor once a year for a physical, perhaps twice a year, and or when we don't feel well. We don't know a great deal about healthcare in general. Some of your colleagues may, I don't want to categorize them all, but we don't know a great deal about it. And so what we know about it is what our perception of healthcare is. How do you, if you do, you go about helping to educate at least your fellow members when it comes to making those kind of decisions? Because not only is it something that we aren't all terribly familiar with, it's also pretty polarizing given the events of the past 6 to 8 years.
Well, I think that we have lots of different people who have lots of different perspectives, and I think we ought to look at them, and if there are ideas that warrant further investigation, I think we ought to have the resources to look at those various programs to see what is going to get to a healthier population, what is going to improve the quality, what's going to decrease the cost, because those are three of the things that we've been trying to do now for some time with variable results. There are some results that say that we're doing very well in that area, and other results that say we aren't doing nearly as well. I think we need to educate our patients so that they are empowered in healthcare, so that they assume their care. And yes, they're going to have coaches and guidance counselors in the form of physicians and other extended team members. But I think that it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we end up at a healthy population that is able to take care of itself, because it's a whole lot less expensive to have a person take care of themselves than to show up with disease and try to take care of them at that point.
When you look overall at this new task that you've taken on, it will certainly be more than healthcare. In fact, one of the first things you'll be asked to do will be look at the budget process, which has become a bit more streamlined in the past 4 years. But I make the assumption you've already been to orientation, you've already met with a lot of the new members and some of the existing members. Give me your first take. I mean, I know you've spent time in Lansing, so it's not your first time there at the Capitol, but give me your first take in walking in as a member-elect.
It's an amazing building. It's an amazing chamber. It always takes your breath away. And I'm looking forward to serving with the other 109 members in the House. It's going to be a challenge to try to get people on board. This is going to be different than being one-on-one with a patient in an exam room and figure out what is best for us. This is going to be myself and 109 others trying to move forward with improvements for the health of this state, for the population of this state, try to get to a healthier Michigan.
Beyond healthcare, what areas do you want to try to focus on? Not that that wouldn't occupy a good deal of your time, but obviously the state has more issues than just that.
I think that it's important to look at jobs, because we have too many people who are unemployed. We have too many people who are underemployed, who had good jobs 4, 5, 6 years ago and now are employed, but in jobs that pay half as much. I think that part of that process also has to be education. I think that education is essential if we're going to have social advancement. I think that we need to look at where we are spending money and do better for our children, because in my home county of Calhoun, we have 24% of our 9th graders not graduating from high school. And I find that's a travesty. And you look at other places like the city of Detroit, where you have 21% of the kids actually graduating and 79% not graduating, and we're leaving an entire generation behind. We have to do better. If our kids are not going to graduate from high school, they need to at least be able to function in society, have careers to society. So I would say that we would need to adjust our education system so it teaches to careers rather than to a test, because I'm not sure that anyone wins when you educate to a test. We need to focus on the students, on the children, because that's the important part of education.
The governor has talked about, and he has been pretty vocal about the fact that after the high school education, that not every student necessarily needs to go to a 4-year school, and he's talking about skilled technical training. That's one thing, but I hear you saying something else. You're talking about students who may not be able to complete that 12-year study, or 13 if you consider the kindergarten part of it, but yet you think that they should be trained to have not only life skills, but a set of skills that would allow them to be employed. Is that what I hear you saying?
I think that it's important that we not leave anyone behind. America is a great nation, and it's hard to carry along the weight of the unemployed and still do great things throughout the world. If we're going to be a world leader, we need a world-class education system, and we don't have that now. You take a look at our children and you look at how they do on a worldwide scale. 31st in math out of the top 50 industrialized countries, 33rd in reading out of the top 50 industrialized countries. And we can do better than this. We can do very much better than this. We have to do better than this if we're going to remain a world leader.
I look at many of the folks who have been elected, either re-elected or newly elected, and they all have some political background of some sort. I look at you coming from a practice in medicine for all of these years as somewhat less political, though you will have to wear that banner because you have now been elected. But talk to me a little bit about what you perceive as the responsibility of the majority in Lansing, because right now Republicans hold big majorities in the Senate, bigger than they did have in the House. All of the constitutional offices, the Supreme Court, for all intent and purpose, they control everything in the city. How much responsibility do they bear when it comes to governance?
I think that they bear a large portion of the responsibility for governance, but I am not certain that you get good ideas from just one side of the aisle. I could see myself going across the aisle and on issues. I've already found several friends from the opposite side, and there's a representative, Paul Clementi, and Paul is a good friend of mine, has been for years. His brother spent, I want to say, 12 years in high school and grade school with me. His brother was my college roommate, and he's an old friend of the family, and he's a Democrat, and we have sat and we have talked, and we'll do that again. And there are other representatives on the other side of the aisle that are friends of my friends as well throughout the state. And I'm looking forward to working with all of them and getting their ideas. And yes, we have a responsibility for governance, but perhaps as a physician, I don't take orders quite as well as some.
Another switch in party representation is up next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. 2 years ago, sitting Republican Representative Holly Hughes was ousted by Democrat Colleen Lamonti in the 91st District. This year, the outcome was just the opposite. Hughes beat Lamonti and the seat changes hands again. That's something that happens regularly in this Muskegon County District. I'll start by congratulating you on your win. It seems like we've been here before. Obviously, you're from a very competitive district. This is a district that has switched more often between Republican and Democrat than any other district that we cover in the time that I've been here. Now back in Republican hands, the Republican majority, a little bigger Republican majority. What's the first thing on your agenda? I mean, you have the advantage over some of the other newly elected members. You've been there before.
I have, and I've already submitted 10 bills.
Right.
So the focus has not changed a bit. It's jobs, jobs, jobs. And that's my favorite subject. That's what I do well with. Right off the bat, when I first started, we helped Eagle Alloy secure a grant that helped with hundreds of jobs back in Muskegon County. So we're going to still focus on that. Veterans Job Fair, I started that 3 years ago when I was a state rep. We'll do it again next year. It'll be our 4th year. Veterans Job Fair. Last time we had 95 businesses, and we'll do it again next May. It's already on the schedule. So we were really excited about that. With the 95 businesses, we had everything from engineering, manufacturing, grocery store clerks, the whole gambit. In fact, we had Alcoa Hamet, who's been there every year, and I'm sure they'll be there again for us next year. We had a new one this year. We had Amway, actually, was building a new plant. So every job you can imagine was in that job range that they were looking for. So veterans continues to be my concentration for job fair. That a third that attended were actual veterans, including 6 Navy SEALs, but 2/3 were regular folks. So it serves all the public who are looking for jobs. But that was the first ever job fair, was that one. I've done a lot of jobs legislation when I was in the legislature. Had my commercial driver's license that was signed into law by the governor, but continued to work after I was in the legislature. Actually, a month after I was out of office, called Representative Stamas, had meetings with him over in Muskegon with Dave Ealing from our Veterans Center. Also had meetings with Senator Molinar, who's now going to be a congressman, and went through a whole list of jobs bills that I wanted to do. Senator Molinar thought they made sense, actually came up with a bill that included 20 jobs within his bill. That was signed into law a couple months ago. I was at the bill signing for that. Also, Senator Judy Emmons gave her a bill that I wanted to do for our Vietnam vets that always seemed to be left behind. And it was honorary degree so that they can get a job, honorary degree in high school, I should say. We did that for World War II. We did that for Korea. It was time to catch up for our Vietnam vets as well. That passed, and I was at that bill signing as well. Representative Rendon has a bill that's coming up, and I talked to him about that. Hopefully that will pass in lame duck. I expect it will. So continued afterwards, trying to live for the greater good and try to make a difference whether I was in office or not. We continued our hard work on those bills in Lansing and also on our job fair. So I'm continuing to work on that, but also working on education and protecting our seniors. Protecting our seniors, I'm on the Senior Resources Board at Tanglewood Park. I fought hard when I was in the legislature to make sure that we kept the money for Meals on Wheels when they were talking about cutting some or reducing some of those programs. That is very important to our seniors. I know when I was my caregiver for my grandmother, it makes a difference to have just a little bit of help. And that Meals on Wheels program is cost effective. It makes it possible for seniors to stay in their home, and let's face it, that's where they want to be. So continue to do that. I passed some bills to protect them with their finances so people don't raid their bank accounts. And then all the way over to education. I have a background in that, being a former school board member, but had legislation on Muskegon Promise Zone. And Jace Bolger this past year appointed me to that board locally in Muskegon. We're working on that actively on the ISD. We're going to have another meeting on that in December. And also working with the ISD on early childhood, because preschool is the difference, we think, in making sure kids are ready for school and that they're reading by 3rd grade. And so we want to expand the preschool program, much as the governor has. He's put extra money into the preschool program and expanding that. He wants to make sure, and I want to make sure, that our kids are ready for school and are successful. So that continues as well. We want to expand from this gap that's in preschool. You have your Head Start program, and then you have this slim amount that have private preschool, and then you have the in-between, where they can't quite qualify for Head Start, but they can't quite afford to pay for preschool. So we were looking at the Ready for School program in Holland. I had those folks up who actually, it's a private program, have raised private dollars. And we were looking at that as well at the ISD level, so I'm on that committee too. So education is tremendously important to me, protecting our seniors, making sure our veterans have a job when they come back, and jobs. But also, I think probably the most rewarding thing that happened on a personal level when I was in the state legislature was the gentleman that I helped who came back from Afghanistan and needed neck surgery. It was an injury that he had sustained over there, and one good bump and he would have become paralyzed, and that would have been really tough on his family. His kids are smaller and so forth, and so we were able to get him the surgery that he needs. But it took me 8.5 months, and it should not take that long to get the help one soldier needs. And so we need to concentrate on that effort as well to make a difference for our veterans.
I want to shift gears a little bit because you've been there before, you've seen it operate, but this legislature is going to look different than the one you served in.
I recognize that.
When you first
yes.
started this 4 years ago. Starting with leadership that I would categorize perhaps as more conservative, at least over in the Speaker's office, and with, I don't want to describe it as a division, but certainly a difference of opinion within the 63 members. There are those who will be more constructionist or adhere more closely. One member that I talked to said, I believe in the platform of the Republican Party, and that was her view of where she stood, where there are others that might be considered more moderate. That's my word. What does this legislature look like?
Well, I think we're going to have to learn some of the new members. My advantage in coming in is I knew who I started with, and that includes our Speaker-elect, Kevin Cotter. So I'm looking forward to serving with Kevin again as Speaker. I think that it's not going to be that big of a jump that you think of. There are a few personalities that are going to stand out, I'll give you that. But I think that under Speaker Jace Bolger and then Speaker Cotter, I think you'll see a lot of similarities. We kind of grew up together, for lack of a better word, and went through a lot of things that first term that we were together. I mean, we did a lot in 2 years to make a difference. You know, got rid of the Michigan business tax, replaced that with a fairer tax, promoted business coming back. You know, during the Granholm years, we lost 800,000 jobs. We've gained 300,000 back approximately during the Snyder years, and we've got a lot of work to do. But I think we're working towards that effort with a AAA bond rating, knowing that Michigan is stable. We've reelected Governor Snyder. Business knows that this is the place to do business, and which is great for our families because now it's family friendly. When you have job friendly, you have family friendly because you need those jobs to keep our kids and our grandchildren and our neighbors here in Michigan. And I think that's going to be what has been the huge difference and will continue to be so. I think you'll still see those same kind of legislative things happening to make Michigan stronger.
In the minute or so that we have left, you're no novice to this game of elections and politics. As a former National Committee woman, you've run for office and won, you've run for office and lost, you've worked on a lot of campaigns, you've helped a lot of people along the way. As you point out, Governor Snyder was reelected, but not in nearly the type of fashion that some believed at the beginning of this election cycle. In other words, there was a lot of pressure put on an incumbent governor. The margins got considerably smaller, and at some point, if one looked at it only as a numerical matter, this was a flip of the coin. As it turned out, Republicans increased their margins in the House, remarkably picked up another seat in the Senate, and reelected the governor and all the constitutional officers. Still, what does that tell you about the electorate out there? Because it was not a runaway election. The results suggest that Republicans came out on top, which is true, but the margins were not that big.
Well, I think it's a reflection of the governor, actually. He is not your normal politician. As you pointed out, I've seen a lot of politicians come and go, worked on a lot of campaigns. But one thing that it sets Governor Snyder apart from the rest is he is not a politician. He really isn't. He's more of somebody who is concentrated on being positive and getting things done. I think that you saw the governor doing the work of the state longer than most politicians would when they've got an up-and-coming election. So I think that's the difference between Governor Snyder and past politicians. He's all about getting the job done and making sure that Michigan moves forward and making a difference for us in our hometowns so that we have the jobs and everything that we need and want, and that Michigan grows. So I think that is the difference, is you've got a governor who's concentrated and focused on his job of making Michigan great.
We're back with more To the Point in just a moment. The new members will soon start to put their mark on the state and their district. No matter what issues they come up against, there will be a fair amount of the same feeling in Lansing over the next 2 years that we had for the last 4. Republicans largely in control of everything, but That doesn't mean they can get everything done that they may want. It's something we'll be talking about each Sunday when you join us. To the Point.